Today at the National Press Club, the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, fresh from finalising a free trade deal with the European Union 8 years in the making, the Minister will outline how Australia's navigating global protectionism and chaos. Don Farrell with today's Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and today's Westpac address. My name's Tom Connell, I'm the club's president and an anchor at Sky News Australia. Our guest today, Senator Don Farrell, the Minister for Trade and Tourism, fresh from inking, of course, the EU trade deal, which became a little bit of a saga. We all learn a little bit more about feta and prosciutto. So after 8 long years of negotiations and multiple governments and ministers, the deal got done. Or has it been done yet? EU farmers are angry, saying the tariff-free quotas are far too generous. Australian farmers say they're not generous enough. Now, in the rules of free trade, if nobody's happy, it usually means it's a pretty fair deal. Alas, here in Australia, New Nationals leader Matt Canavan is weighing up opposing the deal in the Senate. So maybe after 8 long years, the hard work is just beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Minister Don Farrell.
Thank you, Tom, for that kind introduction. I'm hoping that Matt will see the light and recognise that this is in fact a very good deal. Morris, thank you for the invitation, and he did offer me a platform to make me a bit taller. They used to say Kevin Rudd was the smartest man in the room. I tend to be the shortest, so anyway, I declined the offer. So it's true that Matt, who works from my staff, are one of the 2 people in the world still speaking Slovakian. The previous Trade Minister was a fellow called Valdis Dombrovskis from Latvia, whereas the new Trade Minister, Maros Šefčovič, was from Slovakia, and we were able to communicate in Slovakian. But more importantly, I think when I first met him, I recounted a story where in 1993 I'd been in Slovakia. It had just divided from Czech, so it used to be Czechoslovakia, just separated. I'd been in Budapest, travelling by train from Budapest to Prague with one of my fellow senators, Senator Mark Bishop, and we suddenly discovered when we got over the border out of Hungary into Slovakia, we had a visa for Hungary, a visa for Czech Republic. We weren't getting off the train in Slovakia, but we needed a visa. And when we didn't have one, we were carted off the train. And I think Trade Minister Šefčovič was very embarrassed about that, and one of the reasons we got over the hump this time was he was making up for that. No, I'm not sure. But can I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to recognise the many guests here today, including industry representatives and my good friend Lee from the wine industry. This is very, very good news for the wine industry, and let's face it, you need some good news. All of my parliamentary colleagues who've joined us today, Chief Minister Andrew Barr, the world's longest trade minister, and we should give him a little clap for that, I think. My former Labor Minister colleagues, Joel Fitzgibbon and Michael Lee, thank you very much for coming today. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, including the EU Ambassador, for whom we've worked very, very closely to get this deal, and very much of the success of this deal goes to you and the work that you performed. In just letting the Europeans know they had to make us a better offer, otherwise there was going to be no deal, and I know. And finally, can I say hello to my wife of 43 years this year, Nympha. Thank you for coming along. we've had some good news. We've got 3 grandchildren at the moment, and we're going to get a 4th a little bit later in the year, granddaughter. Yeah, that's worth a clap too. Now, in July last year, I delivered the Lowy address to a packed room of Australian foreign policy experts, journalists and diplomats. Some of them were exports too, I suspect. We were just a few short months into the wake of President Trump's Liberation Day, and tensions were ratcheting up as the world adjusted to a new normal in global trade. We found ourselves in a world where Australians weren't looking at the front pages of The Australian or the Financial Review or the Adelaide Advertiser for their morning news headlines. Instead, they were looking across the Pacific to see what the latest news was out of Washington and what it meant for them. Trade was on the agenda internationally, around the Cabinet Room and in our homes at our dining tables. At Lowy, I spoke of how the post-Second World War rules-based order was being challenged as global superpowers rewrote the rules from which they have benefited for decades. The liberalisation of trade, which has lifted millions out of poverty, driven competition and strengthened ties between nations, which were once adversaries, is no longer the sole orthodoxy. In fact, this government has faced the biggest pressure on trade policy of any government in the post-World War era. Australia is blessed with an abundance of prime agricultural land, critical minerals needed to transform the global economy, and the ingenuity and advanced manufacturers and our highly skilled professionals. This means we have benefited greatly from the post-war consensus on free and fair trade, as our exports travel the world into the dining room tables, factory floors and power plants of those nations. It also means that we're exposed in the face of growing protectionism internationally. The energy shocks that we are living through today is a clear reminder of the high costs consumers face when global trading system isn't flowing well. As we assess the new normal in trade, middle powers like Australia have a choice. Do we rebuild the trade barriers of the past through new tariffs, or do we continue to expand or open up new trading relationships with partners? To me, the choice is simple. As Australia's Trade Minister, and the longest serving in 20 years, I've taken a clear-eyed view of my role. More trade means more well-paid, secure jobs for Australians, particularly in the agricultural sector. More trades means more small and medium businesses thriving as our world-class products find new markets. More trade means cheaper products for Australian families and businesses, and more trade means a stronger economy for every single Australian. That's why I've tirelessly and consistently pursued an agenda where we deliver more trade for Australia. Because, in the words of Canadian Prime Minister, who was here just a few weeks ago, Mark Carney, in his address to our Parliament, in this brave new world, middle powers cannot simply build higher walls and retreat behind them. Since first coming to office as Trade Minister in 2022, I'm proud to have overseen a steady growth of Australia's trade with the world. This government was elected on a promise to diversify our trade, and that's exactly what we have delivered. Since the commencement of 2023, the Australia-United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement has seen our exports to the UK more than double under this government. Our agreement with India has seen trade increase by 17%, giving more Australian exporters access to the world's largest country by population, which is experiencing rapid expansion of the middle class, primed to enjoy the best of Australian agricultural exports. And we're going to have another crack at India in the next few weeks. Most recently, our landmark trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates. Australia's first in the Middle East. United Arab Emirates is like the Woolies warehouse of the Middle East, and it's delivering real commercial dividends for our farmers and exporters, and the heft of the UAE Sovereign Wealth Fund looks to Australia for new investment opportunities in clean energy projects. January, I led the largest delegation of Australian exporters to the Gulf Food in Dubai, where we were able to continue capitalising on our deal with the UAE as demand for our agricultural, industrial and services exports boom. This has been supported by the Albanese Labor government's $50 million Accessing New Markets initiative, and seeing the government and industry working in lockstep to expand and deepen exports around the globe. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge some of the excellent companies who joined me for that trip to the UAE, including Ferguson Australia, fantastic South Australian company, Bickford's, another South Australian company, and Honey for Life. When Labor came to government, we inherited $20 billion worth of impediments to Australia's exports into China. It put pressure on our wine producers in the Hunter Valley, and the Clare Valley for that matter, red meat exporters in Queensland and fishermen in the southeast of South Australia. Through considered and consistent engagement with the Chinese government, I've met my counterpart now 13 times, and particularly my counterpart in Commerce, Minister Weng Wen-tao. We have seen all of these trade impediments removed. And in response to Liberation Day in the United States, Australia's position as a trusted partner to the United States and our decision not to retaliate through our own tariffs, which would have only harmed Australian consumers and businesses, has seen us maintain the lowest possible tariff rate under President Trump's trade agenda and secure, most importantly, a carve-out for Australian beef exports, and I believe will continue to have the lowest tariffs between Australia and the United States. Well, the opposition demanded that we do more, but refused to explain what they thought we should be doing. Our approach of working with our American counterparts to remind them of the benefits of trade between our two economies was vindicated. And we've continued to work with like-minded partners to strengthen multilateral bodies like the World Trade Organisation to uphold the rules-based order. And I want to acknowledge my Assistant Minister, who's not here today because he's travelling back from Cameroon, Matt Thistlethwaite, who's done a terrific job representing us and defending our interests at the World Trade Organisation last week. Labor's approach to trade has seen the value of Australia's total trade increase to a record $1.3 trillion last year. Never in the history of Australia have we done so much trade as we did last year. This figure represents real and meaningful economic growth for our country. It represents meat processing jobs that are vital to supporting towns like Murray Bridge in South Australia. Sorry to keep talking about South Australia all the time, but it's hard not to. It represents jobs underground producing minerals like alumina, copper and silicon. In fact, BHP gave me this little badge. I don't know if you can see it there. It's copper from Roxby Downs and carved into a beautiful image of, well, South Australia. But copper, silicon, which all power the global energy transition. And it represents Australian know-how helping build infrastructure projects in the Southeast Asia and the Middle East, like the Riyadh Metro Bowl, which I visited in January with Joel Fitzgibbon. That brings me to the missing piece of the trade puzzle in Australia's network of trading relationships. Last week, after 8 years of formal negotiations and decades of speculation, Australia and the European Union have finally struck a free trade agreement. And I think it's worth pointing out that this is not just with one country, as was with the UK or UAE or India. This is 27 countries. 27 countries, so virtually doubling our relationships around the world. And we estimate this agreement will be worth $10 billion for Australia, and that is one firmly within Australia's national interest. If you listened to President von der Leyen last week, in fact, she was talking about a much bigger figure, close to a 30% increase, which would represent about $35 billion. I think she's anticipating what we're going to be doing in the critical mineral space. So this free trade agreement is a once-in-a-generation trade agreement which will, with the world's second largest economy, they've got an economy worth more than $30 trillion. And it will finally open up access to a market of 27 member countries and 450 million consumers. This is an enormous opportunity for Australia's world-class producers, farmers, winemakers, businesses and exporters. And once the agreement is implemented, Australia's network of trade agreements will span almost 90% of the planet. Our network of free trade agreements, built over the past 25 years by governments of both persuasions, is second to none, and this is a huge national asset. Our agreement with Europeans will deliver real and meaningful benefits for Australian producers, farmers, winemakers, manufacturers and exporters. Our seafood industry will see the removal, just the seafood industry alone, of a 26% tariff and make it easier for our $7 million worth of seafood exports to the EU to grow and thrive. Tariffs on Aussie dairy, rice, sugar, nuts, honey, olive oil, fruit and veg will all be either eliminated or significantly reduced. Our critical minerals will face a tariff cut from 5.5% down to 0%, and we will strengthen cooperation between Australia and EU on critical minerals, renewables and research. For Australia's wine industry, there is excellent news. Our world-class wine producers will benefit from the $37 million in savings when European tariffs are eliminated upon the implementation of this agreement. We've also protected the right of producers to continue to use terms like Prosecco in Australia indefinitely. There'll only be 2 places in the world where you can continue to use the word Prosecco. One is Italy, one is Australia. So we're looking forward to that. The simplification of how Australian qualifications are recognised in Europe will mean that more of our world-class professionals will be able to take Aussie ingenuity and creativity to Europe, putting our stamp on the world. And our red meat sector is going to benefit from this deal. Market access for beef will rise to 35,000 tonnes and sheep meat to 30,000 tonnes, representing a 700% increase in the case of beef and a 500% increase in the case of lamb, sheep meat. Importantly, the increased volumes for beef and sheep meat are also subject to better conditions which we negotiated on the very last day of negotiations in Brussels, which will make it easier for our world-class produce to hit the shelves in the EU, and we've also secured a clause which enables a review of these volumes in 5 years' time. The outcome reflects the key ask put to me by industry in 2023, higher volumes, better condition and a chance to have a second crack. But don't just take my word for this. Here's what the industry is saying. The seafood industry says this FTA should facilitate important long-term market development opportunities for many seafood exports. AusVeg, the peak body for vegetables, potato and onion growers, said providing additional market opportunities into the EU for Australian vegetable grower exporters is some welcome good news. The Business Council of Australia welcomed the deal, and they said a major win for Australians, supporting jobs, lowering costs for households and creating new opportunities for business to grow and compete globally. My friends, the Australian Grape and Wine said the removal on tariffs on Australian wine is good news for our exporters and for the long-term competitiveness of Australian wine in major global markets. And the Export Council of Australia said the FTAs comes at a perfect time. For Australian exporters and investors, the agreement delivers what they need most: certainty, scale and a clear pathway into one of the world's largest and most sophisticated markets. Free trade does more than just create opportunities for Australian exports. It makes things cheaper right here at home for consumers and businesses by cutting costs of imported products from European nations, by eliminating our 5% tariff on European goods and making electric vehicles from the EU cheaper through the changes to the luxury car tax. Our agreement with the European Union goes beyond the economic benefits of our exporters and producers. We've protected the right for producers of European heritage to maintain their connection to the family and culture by continuing to use terms like Parmesan, Kransky, feta to label their products, and many other terms. As someone who is acutely aware of my own Irish heritage, I knew that this outcome was absolutely essential for Australia throughout the negotiations. I particularly want to pay tribute to the Prosecco producers of Australia and their local member, Helen Haynes, who's been very supportive of me through this process, who were persistent in their advocacy to me about the importance of protecting their $200 million industry. Under an agreement with the EU, Australian Prosecco producers will be able to continue to use the name here in Australia indefinitely. There's also been some public commentary in recent days from particular sectors about what this deal means for them. I respect their views and have been frank with them publicly and privately that I disagree with their assessments. As Trade Minister, I must assess this agreement on the national interest. The Australian economy and the community has made up the broadest range imaginable of producers, suppliers, cultural groups and industries. My role is to balance the competing needs of priorities of these disparate groups to deliver a deal which delivers for Australia. And I'm of the firm view that this deal does just that. For decades, there's been a clear and consistent bipartisan approach to free trade in this country. Since Prime Minister Bob Hawke began lowering tariffs to open up Australia to the world, to the trade agreement struck by both Labor and coalition governments in the 2000s and 2010s, free and fair trade has been the goal. Labor continues to unapologetically back free and fair trade because we understand that it's good for our economy, good for Australia, but more importantly, good for the world. Through this deal, our government continues to build a stronger, more stable, more rules-based environment for our economic interests, in partnership with the world's second largest economy. I challenge the coalition under Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan to explain to Australian exporters and consumers why they are considering ripping up decades of bipartisanship on free and fair trade. Will they take us out of the bucket of nations, building links and growing economies through trade, or will they put us in the bucket of those driving up costs for consumers and imposing barriers where there were none before? Now, I've sat across negotiation tables for decades, including with some of Australia's toughest businesses and political leaders, from negotiating on behalf of retail workers for better wages and conditions, to negotiating the deal to keep Harris scarves alive, to negotiating with myriad of personalities that make up the Senate crossbench. And I've seen it all. But my European counterpart, Trade Minister Maros Sefcovic, is one of the toughest negotiators I've ever come across. But he was fair. He might be tough, but he was fair. And of course, I want to assure Australians that I gave as good as I got in these negotiations with the EU. I walked away twice in 2023 when the offer on beef and sheep meat was not good enough. And it's a point of pride that when I met President von der Leyen about this time last week on her arrival in Australia, her first words to me were, "So you're the man who's been causing all this trouble for me." She said that, yeah. But she said it with a smile. She's, very lovely lady. Hey? These deals cannot be done without the dedicated teams of negotiators on both sides, and I wish to thank the Australian officials who've spent many countless hours advocating our interests, and that was led by Cathy Raper, who's here. We should give Cathy a clap. It's a fantastic result for her, but also Alison Burrows, who did the previous set of negotiations. When we walked away in Osaka in 2023 from Europe, she burst into tears. That's Alison, but she did a fantastic job to get us that way. And Alison and George have delivered us the rest of the way. And I also want to congratulate Ken Gordon, my senior advisor, who worked on these negotiations well before he joined me in 2022. He's an integral part of my team, and I hope that he's able to take a breather after this massive couple of years. Ken, are you going to take a breather? Yep. Get a clap. we've still got plenty of work to do because as Trade Minister, the job is never finished. And I'm not the kind of minister to down tools after a headline, leaving industry to figure it out on their own. I'll work with our agencies, including Austrade and Export Finance Australia, and across government to ensure that any Aussie seeking to walk through the doors opened by free trade will find the help that they need to do. It's one thing to have a document and words on a piece of paper. It's quite another thing to actually take advantage of that and get practical results for Australia. I see my job as Trade Minister pushing companies out the door to be more ambitious. I am more ambitious for Australian companies than they are for themselves. And that's what I see my job to be now that we've got this new free trade agreement with these 27 new countries. Whether you're a farmer looking for a new market for your produce, a manufacturer whose life-saving product is ready to export, or a service supplier ready to take your skills to the world, I and the Anthony Albanese Labor government are here to help. Thank you very much.
Mr. Leader. Thank you, Minister. Just so the camera has a nice shot of you, just returning there to the microphone for us. You read out a few reactions and you alluded to some other to the trade deal. So the one I'll flesh out, I'm sure you're familiar with, Meat and Livestock Australia called it the worst trade deal ever for red meat. Is it fair to say the overall outcome, was it less than ideal, but when you look at the whole trade deal and how long this had been going for, something needed to be done, you can get stronger footholders and hopefully improve it in the future, but kicking this off again just wasn't acceptable?
No, that's a very good question. And I have to say, I was disappointed in the response of meat and beef and sheep. They put a number of requests to me. Firstly, they said, we want the outcome that Canada got. So if you have a look at the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, negotiated 10 years ago, it says Canada has got access to 50,000 tonne of beef. Okay, our agreement is only 35,000 tonne. But if you ask the Canadians how have they gone in those 10 years, despite having a 50,000 tonne amount in their agreement, not a single kilo of Canadian beef has been delivered into the EU in that time. So I didn't want the Canadian deal. I wanted a deal with the Europeans that resulted in every single kilo of that 35,000 tonne of beef to be delivered into Europe. And the conditions that we have now negotiated mean that every one of those tonne of beef will be delivered into Europe. Okay, the South Americans got a deal. It still hasn't passed the European Parliament, that deal. I'm very confident with the support of the French, we will get our deal through the European Parliament, and that will be a very good result. But there's a more important reason why Australian beef and sheep meat should support this agreement. When we came to government 4 years ago, the total amount of red meat sold into the international market was worth $9 billion. Last year, red meat sales hit $18 billion. We have doubled the amount of beef exports. And it doesn't matter whether you look at the United States, China, you name it, just about any country in the world, our beef exports have been booming. How do we keep that going? How do we keep that open trade going that's resulted in the doubling of our trade? We keep it going by sending a message to the rest of the world, all of those countries that are thinking about protectionism, and there's plenty of them right now, Tom. We send a message to all of those countries, we're prepared to stand up for free and fair trade. And so this was not just about getting 35,000 tonne of beef into Europe. This was about sending a message to all of those other countries that we trade with, that we rely on the prosperity, telling them, hey, we are interested in free and fair trade. And here we have another 27 countries that are also interested in free and fair trade. So the benefit to Australian beef and lamb is not just the volumes that they get out of this agreement. It's the fact that we've sent a message to the rest of the world, hey, we can do deals, we can improve your prosperity at the same time as improving our prosperity.
I've got a few more, but I think my colleagues are probably wiser than me on this today, so I'll go to Ron Myerson from the AFR.
Thank you, Minister. I want to take you to the other side of the Atlantic. In the last 12 months, obviously, the United States imposed global tariffs and various iterations of that, and the unilateral strikes on Iran and the global fallout from that. Are you concerned that the United States has become an unreliable trading partner under Donald Trump? And you've talked about the free trade agreements and forging them and creating a trading bloc. Does Australia have a role to be a more proactive proponent of a middle power-led order?
Well, answering that second question first, I think that's exactly what this free trade agreement does. It says to the rest of the world, look, okay, we're a middle power. I mean, we're negotiating with the Europeans, with a group of countries with 450 million people. We've got less than 30 million people. And yet, we're able to get an agreement with them, and a fair agreement. A set of negotiations, you never get everything you want. I've learnt that over 50 years of negotiating. But this is a fair agreement. It's fair to the Europeans and it's fair to Australia. So we've sent out that demonstration. America is a democracy. Just over 12 months ago, they elected Donald Trump as their leader, and we have to respect that that was the decision that the Americans took. We can't change that. But by demonstrating to the Americans that we did not retaliate when they imposed tariffs on us, I think we've sent a very positive message. I've got a good relationship with my counterpart, Jamieson Greer. So we're in, I wouldn't say constant communication, but regular communication. Can I tell you what's happened to our trade with the United States since so-called Liberation Day? Almost exactly 12 months ago. Our trade with the Americans is at a record level. Our trade has increased 67% since Liberation Day. Well, why is that? Well, because we had the lowest tariff of any country in the world. Our competitors, who are trading into the US, then had a higher cost. And so we took advantage of that. Our industry is very, very nimble in this country. And of course, what was my argument to Jamieson Greer? These tariffs on Australian beef were counterproductive. They're actually pushing up the costs of your hamburgers in the United States. What did they do? They removed the 10%, again, providing us with a significant benefit. Not only did we sell more into the United States, but because China imposed tariffs on the United States beef, so if you went into a supermarket in Beijing, you'd see an Australian steak right next to an American steak. Our trade to China in beef has also gone up. I mean, how did we get to that $18 billion figure that I mentioned a moment ago? We're getting more into the US and more into China.
Thank you.
Stephen Jedgetts from the ABC.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Minister, for your address. I might also take you to the US, if that's all right. Obviously, it's been a fairly wild ride over the last 12 months, and Donald Trump's fixation with tariffs is very well known. But I'd be curious for your view. Do you think that there is a chance that his fixation with the tariffs might not outlast him? Like, do you anticipate that future US administrations might return to something like a more conventional posture on trade, or is it possible that future administrations, including Republican ones, might enshrine this in the way they do business? And just to be a bit difficult, a two-pronged question. question briefly. You've talked a bit, or a few people have talked a bit about this being the last piece in the jigsaw puzzle when it comes to Australia's free trade architecture. There is one other entity, though, to use a word, Taiwan, which I think is Australia's 7th largest market for exports. The government of Taiwan has made it clear it's still very interested in an FTA. Is this something your government, in its second term, would be willing to countenance?
Well, let's talk about Donald Trump and whether his policies will outlive him or not. The argument that we have been presenting to the Americans is simply this, that how is it that America has been the largest economy and so prosperous, particularly since World War II? It's because they opened up their economy to the world and expected other countries to do the same. I mean, the whole structure of the World Trade Organization is based around free and fair trade. I think the Americans, and it started to happen already, it started with beef, the Americans will realise that their decision to reimpose tariffs will ultimately cost the American consumers. Why is that? Well, they're already paying higher prices for everything they import, so the cost of living is going up. But more particularly, if you look at things like steel and aluminium, they've got a 50% tariff on those products. So once those products get to the United States and they turn them into manufactured goods, well, that means their products that they're selling to the world, they're more expensive and they're less competitive to other competitors. So I think it will eventually dawn on the Americans that this is the wrong path. Unfortunately, I fear that if they don't reverse the positions and there's a change of administration at the next election, the amount of money that these tariffs are raising, bear in mind, Australian companies don't pay this. This is by and large paid by the importers. My fear is that the Democrats might very well say, look, we can't give up this, trillions of dollars worth of extra. As far as Taiwan is concerned, we have a really good trading relationship with Taiwan. I've been to Taiwan. The Prime Minister has been to Taiwan, and we'll continue talking with all of our potential trading partners.
So it's on the table?
I said we'll continue talking with all of our trading partners.
Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times.
Thank you, Minister, for your speech. Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times. Fair representation of the territories in the federal parliament has been in the ALP national platform since 2023. Along with your ACT Labor colleagues, you've made clear that you want to deliver this but shelved it before the election to focus on donations reform. Are you determined to get this done before the next election? What's your argument to those in the Liberal Party who say that we don't need extra federal politicians? What, in your view, is the right number of senators in the ACT? And would you consider giving the territory one or more extra Senate seats independent of any increase to the House of Reps if you're not able to secure a deal on this this term?
Thank you, and that's a multiplicity of questions there, but I think I can answer all of them by the one answer. After every election, the Special Minister of State, that's one of my other jobs, day job, refers off all of the issues that you've just mentioned to the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters. And so that's what I've done. I do ask them to look at particular issues, and of course one of the issues I've asked them to look at is the representation in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The last time the numbers of parliamentarians was increased was during the Hawke years, so almost more than 40 years ago. Our population back then was 16 million. Our population at the next election is likely to be 29 or close to 29 million. So in other words, the population's almost doubled, but the representation has largely stayed the same. To go back earlier than that, Chifley, Ben Chifley increased the size of the Parliament in the 1940s. So roughly every 40 years there's been a re-evaluation of representation. Increasing the size of Parliament is what great Labor leaders do.
Okay.
The committee has already recommended the increase, though, after the 2022 election. I think they recommended 4 for the ACT. Would you like 4 for the ACT, or...?
I'll continue my discussions with all of the parties. I've met the Nationals. They're interested in the issue. I've spoken with the Conservatives, the Liberals. They're not interested, and I'm, as I always do, go out and consult with all of the parties, including Senator Pocock from the ACT, and he's made his position very clear.
So splitting it out briefly, more ACT members, given the size of the population here, is that something you're pursuing?
No. I'm waiting for JSCAM to come down with their recommendations. When I see that, I'll continue my discussions with all.
And on your great Labor leaders line, is Anthony Albanese a great Labor leader?
He certainly is.
So there'll be an increase the next election or the one after? Is that what you'll be ready for?
No, I'm not saying that at all. No, yeah.
Will you be disappointed if you don't get this up before the next election?
I've had plenty of disappointments in my life. In politics, you get used to disappointments. But look, last time round, when we did the donations reforms, I was told, look, you'll never get this through. You know, you haven't got the support in the Parliament to get it through. And on the last day of the last Parliament, we did get it through, and it's amazing set of reforms to increase transparency and reduce the influence of big money in our system. I'm not going to anticipate where it's going to get to, but I certainly haven't given up.
All right, Andrew Probyn from the Nine Network.
Minister, you must be a very annoying poker player. I want to talk to you, ask you...
Yes, I like somebody
about fuel.
That's it. Yep.
Now, as you're aware, Qatar's lost a lot of its LNG capacity, export capacity. First of all, what opportunities are there for Australia? And specifically on your portfolio, there's some interesting legislation that's going, I think it's going to be introduced today. Export finance, Australia's changing its mandate to include imports, which is interesting. And secondly, Katie Gallagher is going to be given the capacity to write $2 billion cheques. Qatar, big cheques, exports, now more about imports. What's going on here? What's the game plan, and who you're looking at in particular?
Yeah, thanks. Very good question. Thanks, Andrew. So the legislation you're talking about today is to give export finance more authority. We've got the head of export finance here somewhere. John. There's John. And you can talk to him afterwards. He'll answer all the questions. So what we discovered. So there's a range of problems with fuel right now, but one of the problems is supply. And you'll have seen there were some ships that were heading towards Australia that have been cancelled. What export finance will now be able to do is to go to those companies that are importing new oil, so not existing contracts, new oil, and say, if you're having trouble financing this particular supply of oil to Australia, we're going to help you do that. And they've got a range of economic tools that do that. Export finance does a fantastic job for Australia. They're nimble, they're fast, and we can very quickly ensure that we're getting the fuel supplies that we need. Now, distribution is another issue, but I think that's going to be discussed this afternoon at Cabinet. In terms of Qatar, some of our countries in East Asia, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Chinese, were thinking, well, okay, Australia's been a good supplier of gas, but perhaps we should look at other parts of the world, including Qatar, which have got some of the largest gas resources in the world. as a source of our supply of gas. I think those countries are now reconsidering that idea, given the problems currently in the Middle East. And I think what's happened now is the fact that we have not failed to deliver on 1 kilojoule of gas, contracted gas into Japan, Korea, China. I think these companies are saying, look, we've got a good little supply chain here, it's safe, and we're a reliable supplier. Remember this, Andrew, every day in Tokyo, the first 7 hours of electricity in the Japanese capital is supplied from gas from Australia. They want reliable supplies, we're providing it, and we're going to continue to do that.
And what of Malaysia? Malaysia's got struck a deal with Tehran to get its oil tankers through. What efforts are you making there?
Well, we're talking to all of our colleagues in the region about how we get through this. As you know, the Prime Minister recently struck an arrangement with the Singaporeans. One thing this government has done is try and build relationships with particularly our Southeast Asian and our East Asian colleagues. We weren't punching them in the nose like the former government was. So I think the fact that we've built these relationships will hold us in really good stead to try and get through this difficult time.
Thanks.
James Mager from Bloomberg.
Good afternoon, Minister. Thanks for your time today. I have 2 questions, as everyone else is having multiple questions as well. When she was here, Ursula von der Leyen emphasised that this wasn't just a trade deal, but it was a package with the security deal and also the entry into Horizon. And she also mentioned that the deal with India was the same, that she had done a security deal and a trade deal in India. So how much was the security pact really the thing that pushed this trade deal over the line? How much was it that the really much more difficult security environment in Europe compared to 2 years ago is the thing that has forced Europeans to come to the table, and also Australia's much more difficult security environment is the thing that has caused Australia to come to the table? And my second quick question on Taiwan is, Taiwan and China's application to join CPTPP are the next in line after the UK has been approved. Do you see either Taiwanese application or the Chinese application, or both of them moving forward this year, now that the runway is clear for them? Thank you.
On the CPTPP, it's a very, very long name, hard to remember. China and Taiwan aren't the next two countries to be dealt with. We've selected in Melbourne four countries, so it's Uruguay, UAE, Philippines and Indonesia. On top of that, we've also got an application from Costa Rica, and I think Costa Rica will be the next country that's submitted, and then we're dealing with those other four countries. When we've dealt with them, which might be in the next 12 months, we'll have a look at who comes next. So that's the sequence right at the moment. You've mentioned the India Free Trade Agreement. I should have mentioned this when I was talking about this earlier. The India-EU agreement has no agricultural access for India. Had we not got an agreement last week with the Europeans and come back in, say, 5 or 10 years' time, agriculture will be off the table, or would have been off the table. So another good reason why we should have done the deal when we did. I don't think you can divvy up in President von der Leyen's mind, and we've got the ambassador here, he might be able to talk more accurately for... no, he's refusing, so I'll have to talk for President von der Leyen. I don't think you can divvy up as to what was more important in her mind. Obviously, there's a war in the Ukraine. The young man who married my daughter a few weeks ago is Ukrainian heritage, and later in the year we'll have a granddaughter of Ukrainian heritage. So from our point of view, Europe is really important. The Europeans love the fact that outside of NATO we're the largest supporters of Ukraine. But I think she also wanted to send a message, like we did to the rest of the world, that free and fair trade is important in this world and that there are still countries that are capable of doing agreements on free and fair trade. So, and you've got Horizon. I think all of those things in her mind were just as important as the other.
Tessa Conomu from AAP.
Thank you very much for your time, Minister, today.
Thank you, Tess.
In relation to ratification, which you mentioned in your speech, are you able to advise when you expect the FTA to be ratified, and have the Europeans indicated whether it could be fast-track given that there are more than 20 countries?
Thank you. With the UAE agreement, we managed to do that in less than 12 months. I would hope that that sets the template for what we can do with the Europeans, because the sooner we can get all of our products into Europe, the better. I hope I'm not verbling the EU Commissioner, Ambassador today, but maybe the Europeans can also get it done in that same time frame. So you can never predict these things. There's a process in Australia for how you deal with free trade agreements. They've got to go to the Treaties Committee. They've got to lay on the House of Parliament on the Parliamentary table for 15 days, and then they have to be signed into law. There will be some legislative changes required, particularly in the tax area. But I would not rule out, given the enthusiasm both of Australia and Europe at the senior levels, that we get this deal done by the end of the year.
Jack Quayle from The Australian.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Minister, for your address today. I just wanted to draw your attention to some of those concerns that Tom raised from the MLA earlier. I guess how hopeful are you that you can secure a better deal for Australian farmers 5 years down the track when there's this review of the beef quotas under the deal?
5 years. Look, all I can say is that we've developed a really strong relationship with the Europeans out of this arrangement. I've met with my European counterpart 4 or 5 times in the last 12 months. We signed the deal finally about this time last week. There was a few last-minute hitches. We went to the restaurant Malto on Kingston Foreshore, had a beautiful glass of my Cabernet to celebrate the occasion. He gave me a bottle of champagne from Europe. That was very nice. I think both Prime Minister Albanese has a very, very good relationship with President von der Leyen, as he does with, President Macron, the Irish Prime Minister, the Italian Prime Minister because of his heritage. I think we've established a really good relationship with the Europeans. As I said, there was an element of distrust, having rejected the agreement on 2 occasions. But I think that's passed now, and they are satisfied that we are reliable trading partners, not just because of what we're doing in the defence space, but because we've now signed the agreement.
But I guess to assuage some of those concerns that beef exporters have, I mean, how hard will we be pushing to ensure that when this review comes up, that quotas can be increased?
Look, my first job is to implement what we have agreed, and that's what I'm going to be focused on. I think there are, fantastic opportunities, $10 billion worth of new trading opportunities here in Europe. My first job will be to run that out, and when we've done that, we'll come and have a look at what else we can get out of the Europeans.
Thank you.
Probably could have had this sponsored today with all the shout-outs, but maybe an opportunity next time, Morris. I'm scanning, I can't see Shane, so Corey McLeod from Innovation Oz.
Thank you for your address, Minister. You're right. Horizon Europe was announced as part of the free trade agreement. Obviously, they're very different things, but can we take something from the fact that intention to negotiate participation in Horizon Europe might lay the foundation for greater trade, particularly embedding Australian IP and R&D rich companies into European business environment?
Look, I think that's exactly the interpretation that I would put on the Horizon agreement. I mentioned that figure of $10 billion versus the figure that President von der Leyen was using of 30% or around $35 billion. I think the Europeans, like the Americans, see Australia as a wonderful opportunity in the renewable space. So we're the lucky country when it comes to critical minerals. We've got either the most or the second most reserves of all the critical minerals of the world. Significantly, what Australia has that other countries like Greenland or Ukraine don't have is the ability to extract that. We've got the greatest miners in the world in this country, the most successful mining industry. I think what you'll find is, particularly in the critical mineral space, the new technologies space, that the Europeans are looking to Australia to provide those raw materials. We should ensure that we do some value adding so that we get the best possible price for our product. But I think we're going to be able to do a lot more. And one of the new fuels of the future is going to be hydrogen. Hydrogen was flavour of the month for a while. You'll have seen that it's dropped off in recent times. One of the reasons for that is that having produced hydrogen, it's so hard to transport. If you're transporting liquid gas, you transport it at minus 163 degrees. To transport hydrogen, you've got to transport it at 263 degrees. What I think you'll find is, as time goes by, the Europeans will be looking for us to have green sources of energy. That will mean that eventually we'll be building, hydrogen transformers close to where they're going to be needed to produce the green lithium or whatever it is you might be producing. So I think in that critical mineral space, that'll be one of the really important part of the deal. But then space, we're underdone in space. When I was a kid, Whyalla was one of the great, rocket firing places in the world. We dropped the ball there. South Australia under Premier Malinauskas is very, very focused on the space industry. I think we can do a whole lot more in the space industry with the Europeans.
Thank you.
Joseph Albrecht-Palmer from Newswire.
Thank you, Minister, for your address, and on behalf of Polish Australians, dziękuję bardzo for helping us keep our product names. I just want to draw your attention to some comments the Prime Minister made at a dinner, the minerals industry dinner the other night. He said, "The stable, predictable world of ever-expanding free trade is gone, and it will not be returning anytime soon." I would say that the situation is slightly different from where you're standing and from where Brussels is. The EU has just sealed deals with Mercosur and India and now Australia, and Australia has signed deals with the UK, with the UAE, and now the EU. So is free trade really gone? And secondly, sources in Brussels were telling me for weeks up until the deal that it was either this deal or there would be no future deal. So what was your tensest moment with Mr. Šefčovič?
I'm not sure if I can reveal that. I have 3 daughters. One of them is married to a lovely young Ukrainian boy. And as I said, we're expecting a Ukrainian heritaged granddaughter in a few months' time. Another one, partner, is German. They've just bought a dog, big Bernese mountain dog. But the oldest one, Mary, she's married to a Polish fellow. So I have 3 grandchildren my wife and I have 3 grandchildren of Polish heritage. So I'm no good at the language, but I'm sure what you said to me was very complimentary.
All good, thanks.
America represents 13% of world trade. So that means that there's 87% of non-American trade. What our agreements have done over the last 3 or 4 years, and what this new free trade agreement with Europe does, and maybe another one with India, we're still talking with India about a fresh agreement, it sends a message to the rest of the world that, you know, you can in fact do free and fair trade. It is possible. My job now is to convert that wish, that desire, into practical results. And I think if over the next 12 months we can demonstrate to the Australian community that our prosperity is reliant on this free trade. Why is free trade so important? Well, 1 in 4 Australians work in an outward-facing business, and if you work for one of those companies, firstly, the profits of those companies are going to be higher, but the wages of the employees in that company are going to be higher. We can be both a pro-trade, a pro-business and a pro-worker government, and that's what I intend to be. Thank you.
And on Mr. Sefcovic?
Look, there was a number of tense meetings. I think because we had rejected the agreement twice, there was an expectation that we weren't fair dinkum about negotiating an agreement. So when I had my first meeting with him, I think they were naturally suspicious that, you know, here's a bloke who leads them along, makes them think that they're going to get an agreement, and then refuses to do the deal. And so I think I had to convince him that we were in fact fair dinkum about reaching an agreement, and bit by bit we managed to do that. In fact, last weekend, last Monday, so exactly a week ago, I was supposed to meet him, take him in a car to Admiralty House, where we would greet the European President, and then, you know, have our discussions. I said to him, look, how about we cancel the car? Why don't we walk down to Circular Quay, catch the ferry over to Milson's Point and make our way to Admiralty House? And so he got to see firsthand the Opera House, go under the bridge, and it gave us a terrific opportunity to continue to build the relationship. And I think, you know, there is now a trusting relationship, like I have with just about every other trade minister around the world. I think we've now got and rebuilt that trusting relationship with the Europeans.
Thank you.
Melissa Code from the Mandarin.
Thanks, Minister, for your address. I wanted to ask for your take on WTO reforms and how fit for purpose that organisation is. The head of that institution herself has warned about promises the WTO making outpacing the results it can deliver. And obviously, geopolitics at the moment means governments are focused with their attention elsewhere. Are you hopeful that urgent reform can be delivered so that the WTO is fit for purpose in these uncertain times?
Well, that's certainly the objective, and I work with Director General Ngozi to try and get that outcome. I should have been in Cameroon last week, but with the arrival of the European President, I stayed here, and we sent my assistant, Matt Thistlethwaite. He did pull off a very, very good agreement over there on e-commerce. So for the first time, we've got a permanently established e-commerce agreement. That's on top of the fisheries agreement, which we negotiated a couple of years ago. So we can make progress in the WTO. It's hard work. There's plenty of naysayers and plenty of countries who don't want it to succeed, but we're one of the countries that do, and we'll continue to work with Director General Ngozi and our friends, the Cairns Group and all of these other organisations that do support Australia to try and promote free and fair trade.
Just about out of time. Senate question time starts pretty slowly. We can fit in Naveen, can we? It's 1:35.
Yep, sure,
All
of
right.
course.
Naveen,
Try and keep it short and sharp. Minister, you mentioned you'd have a crack at India in a few weeks' time. Do you expect it to be as hard a bargain as it was with the EU? And what are the opportunities you'll be putting forward?
Well, just like Mr. Sefcovic is a hard negotiator, my counterpart Piyush Goyal, who's the Indian Trade Minister, is a very hard man. So I wouldn't anticipate an easy set of negotiations. They have great ambitions. I mean, the Indians tell me all the time, look, do you realise we've got a population of 1.4 billion, and here you are, you've got a population of 30 million. India represents great opportunities. They have the ambition that by 2030, 900 million Indians will be in what they define as the middle class. What do we know about people when their incomes rise? Well, they want better food and better wine. So here's a wonderful opportunity. Clare Valley wine. No, I shouldn't have said that. I can't be promoting my own products.
McLaren Vale's pretty good as well.
Well, Tom's just been down there and he thinks the McLaren Vale is the best. We'll have to get you to the Clare Valley. I might add, look, it's a long weekend this weekend, and anybody's looking for... I'm a tourism minister also, looking for a lovely place to visit. There's still a few, rooms available in the Clare Valley. And if you're a racing person like myself, the Clare Valley races are on this weekend too. Where was I?
Point of order, Minister.
Okay. So Piyush Goyal, he's a hard man, but just like Commissioner Sefcovic likes my wines, we took Piyush out to my vineyard, and my wife was kind enough to host them. And ever since they've gone back to India, they haven't been talking about anything else but beautiful Clare Valley Cabernets. I've said this a couple of times. If it was easy to negotiate an agreement with the Indians, then somebody would have done a comprehensive agreement. I think with India, make this distinction between India and China. China's an autocracy. The government at the most senior levels can make decisions, and those decisions can be implemented. India, the world's greatest democracy. Farmers are a very important part of the government's constituency. They've got to bring the people with them. So with India, I think it's much harder for them to make decisions. One good thing is, though, in the agreement that the Indians negotiated with the Europeans, they did drop the tariff on wine. Our existing agreement with India provides that if India gives any other country a better deal, then they have to match it. So our tariffs in India dropped from 70%. So they used to be 150 under the first agreement. They dropped to 70% under the first agreement. They now dropped to 25%, which is what the Indians gave the Europeans. So already, without doing anything, we've managed to get a lower tariff into India. And how do I know that the Indians know that that's their obligation? Because Piyush Goyal, the Trade Minister, told that to my counterpart Sefcovic, so they know full well. I think with India, it'll be step by step. We're not going to get a big bang agreement. We'll make progress, and that'll work for a while, then we go back and do some more. I just think that's the only way in a democracy like India that it can work.
Thanks, Minister.
Well, we'll see you in 8 years when that's all done. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the Minister, Don Farrell.